listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me spend some time with you. Yes, it's me. Myra is not supervising me at the moment. She has some other things that she had to be doing today, and quite honestly, when I was putting these notes together, I realized that it would be, I don't want to say easier, but probably more conducive for me to do this particular one by myself. So that's why she's not here, and I'm not recording this with her. So if you still like what you hear, even though she's not here, those share buttons really work really well. It just helps us be found easier by more people. That's basically what it does. If you haven't been to GiveGod90.com lately, you might want to check that out. Author Jerry Mitchell is where the books are available. So with that and the commercials out of the way, I'm going to, I don't want to say go back to where I started, but kinda, in a way. Because a lot of times I am asked, what's wrong with tradition? What's the big deal about tradition? And to answer that, depending on who's asking, I typically will ask them, exactly what tradition are you talking about, right? What are you referring to here? Before I get into some of that, let's look at how having a more accurate knowledge of facts are able to offer us a better foundation than forming an opinion based on legend, right? Because that's what traditions typically come from. Traditions don't really stem from facts. Traditions more are an extension of legends, primarily when we're talking biblically. They may have a small amount of truth in them, but primarily they're based and founded on legends. So let's look at something here. When we teach our young people accurate facts, like how to count, right? Learning the alphabet, learning the letters of whatever language you might speak. When they learn to count, it's the beginning of teaching them how to add, subtract, multiply, which is really nothing more than adding groups of numbers. They learn how to divide, which is subtracting groups of numbers. And then when they learn their letters, they learn how to form words and then sentences, how to write in such a way that it can be understood by someone that's reading it, right? You want to have that. And then they build on this knowledge. And that result might be anything. Think about Sir Isaac Newton, right? Obviously, he had a good teacher that taught him how to count, how to add, subtract, all those things. He had a good teacher that was able to teach him the language that he spoke, and he was able to convey the things that he figured out in his book called The Principles of Mathematics. Now, if Newton had not learned how to count, he couldn't add, subtract, he wouldn't have the foundation to form his theory of gravity. If he didn't learn how to read and write, learning his letters, he would not have been able to convey that knowledge in an understandable manner in his book. Now, I need to be careful here. Because I'm going to tell you something, and I don't often use something like this as an example, but there's ways to play with numbers, right? And when you first look at it, you go, oh, well, okay, that's strange. But give me a second here. I'm going to use this example. If I want to buy an item that has a price tag of $100 or 100 something, right? And I don't have it. Well, let's suppose then that I borrow $50 from one person and $50 from another person. That gives me my $100, right? Two different people are going to give me $50. If the item only winds up costing $97, I've got $3 left over, right? So how do I divide $3 if I don't have change? How do I divide $3 between two people? Well, I give each one of them $1 back and I keep $1. Well, the joke is, what happens to the other $1? You see, if I give each of the people $1 back, that means instead of giving me $50, they gave me $49, right? But 49 plus 49 is 98. Now, the $1 I keep, I give, when I add that back in, I only get 99, right? What happens to the other $1? Did you follow that? If two people give me $50 each, could be 50 cents each, right? That might be easier. And the item costs 97 cents. Well, I have 3 pennies. I give each person a penny. So that means literally they only gave me 49 cents. 49 cents plus 49 cents is still 98 cents. Plus the penny I have is 99. What happened to the other one? Well, it's actually a trick on numbers because you're not calculating it properly. There was the comedy duo of Abbott and Costello where one tries to convince the other that 27 divided by 9 is 13. It's quite a comical situation when you watch it. And there's lots of other very similar tricks in mathematics that do this as well, but that's what they are. They're tricks. It's nothing more than a manipulation of certain numbers and the way you count it back. I don't advise anybody doing this with their tax collector. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work. Hopefully they're smart enough not to fall for it. But the same thing happens when we allow traditions that are based on legends or trickery to replace the way we practice our faith. It's that simple. There's a very famous confrontation between Yeshua, Jesus, and the Pharisees in Mark chapter 7, Matthew chapter 15. And we see the disciples not washing their hands before they eat bread. Now, from Matthew 15, it says some of the Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem and said, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? They do not wash their hands before they eat bread." Jesus replied, "Why do you break the commands of God for the sake of your tradition?" Uh-oh. He's throwing it back in their face. He said, why would you rather keep your tradition than follow the Creator's instructions? Right? That's what he's asking them. The tradition of hand washing wasn't what we might think of it today, right? Unless you're a practicing Jewish person. And yeah, if you hear the barking, that is Susie. She thinks she hears something. You see, back then, to properly wash your hands before eating bread, you would take a two-handled pitcher and bowl. It's known as a nagelwasser today. I believe that's a Yiddish word, if I'm not mistaken. But you would pour the water over each hand while you would offer the blessing for washing hands. Of course, there's nothing in the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. There's nothing in the prophets concerning this. The only real tradition that had been passed down from Abraham about eating bread was to offer the blessing, not for the bread, but the blessing to the Creator for the bread. And that was given to him by Melchizedek, the Melchizedek. He had learned this blessing when he served bread and wine. And today, many practicing Jewish people will recite that same blessing when the bread and wine are served. And it was so ingrained in the Jewish people at the time of Yeshua, when Jesus was around, that if you were writing to another Jewish person, it was simply referred to as the blessing. And we see that in Matthew 26, Mark 14, Luke 22. There was no command to wash your hands in any special way. And it didn't happen before the Pharisees kind of came up with it out of thin air, right? And Yeshua confronts the Pharisees and he says, look, you've abandoned the commands of God. You've replaced the commands of God with your own traditions, which are empty and have no value. Then, he just keeps piling it on, right? He quotes Isaiah 29. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. They teach as doctrine the precepts of men. So how do we go from that particular teaching, right, where Yeshua, Jesus, is insisting that we keep the commands of the Father, we keep the commands of the Creator, we go from that to saying, oh, he declared all food clean. It's another tradition that Christians use as an excuse to be able to eat whatever they want. It has no biblical foundation, no biblical proof, no biblical authority. You see, that tradition that has no biblical foundation holds no biblical truth, and it therefore has to be false. Cannot be real. Traditions come from legends, from fictitious interpretations. Look at December 25th, right? The birthday of Yeshua, the birthday of Jesus. There's no biblical reference to that date. There's no biblical reference to that time of year. Not in the middle of winter. The only biblical reference to winter is talking about the Feast of Dedication, Hanukkah. Yet Christians have developed the tradition of celebrating that birth along with, they keep it with many other traditions that we know are derived from pagan sources. It's tradition. It's not founded on biblical evidence. And there's other traditions as well, right? And I know that it sounds like I'm harping on this, but how in the world can you take 3 days and 3 nights and fit it into the time frame between Friday afternoon and Sunday morning at sunrise? It's impossible. It can't be done. Yet practically every practicing Christian practices that tradition instead of following the biblical clues, the biblical evidence that we have. Some denominations, not all, but some, have, I should say, are celebrating, continue to celebrate a practice known as Maundy Thursday. And in that service, it is supposed to replicate the events of the Last Supper. Now, Maundy in Christian speak, okay, in church speak, as I like to call it, Maundy is the Christian rite of foot washing. And there's nothing wrong with Christians wanting to replicate the Last Supper. But for far too many, it has become a tradition that has actually replaced actual worship. They'll gather, they'll sing a few hymns, they might pray, there might be a short message. But the problem is the tradition of foot washing, and some people use hand washing today just for the practicality of it. That actually replaces what they're supposed to be replicating. It takes place of real worship. Some Christians, not all, but some, have chosen to become part of the Messianic or Hebrew roots movement. And in some instances, there's a lot of Messianic congregations. They're simply replacing one set of traditions for another. Instead of doing the Christian traditions, now they're doing the Messianic traditions. And yes, there's a lot of them because they more closely emulate the Jewish traditions. We've attended Messianic services where the entire congregation has become so ritualistic. They know when to daven. That's D-A-V-E-N. It's the nodding of the head, right? They know when to do that at exactly the right moment. And it's strange to watch, because that form of prayer is for an individual, not for a congregation. Simply switching traditions is not what the Creator desires for us. What the Jewish people today might be wanting to consider if they are approached by someone who's trying to proselytize them, they should turn it around, right? They need to consider this, because this would be, I'd love to see this conversation, where somebody is telling a Jewish person, oh, you've got to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior. Why? You didn't. You don't follow his teachings. Why should I? If you're trying to tell me I need this, but you're not doing it? You're not doing it? He's the one who said, give up your traditions to follow the commands of the Creator, to follow the commands of God. But you're not doing it? You want, most Jewish people, most practicing Jewish people, probably come closer to it than most Christians. Because Christians seem to love their traditions. Now, when it comes to traditions and how they can change, we have a great example of that recently, right? The Super Bowl, the American Super Bowl, American football. The first Super Bowl was in 1967. So 59 years, what happened? 58 years, what happened? Well, certainly the rules of the game have changed. The commercials have really changed. Halftime show has certainly changed. But there's something else that has happened that not a lot of people pay attention to. You see, instead of the game being played around the timing of the game, it's played around the timing of commercials. It has definitely become overly commercialized. And, I haven't watched a Super Bowl game in years. And from what I can read and what I've heard about the game this year, the NFL, if they don't change and get back to the game, there's going to be a new Super Bowl tradition. And that is that nobody's going to watch it. It's that simple. Man-made traditions, they have no real foundation. They can't build on anything other than, this might have been a good idea. Maybe we should get back to the way it started, right? If you have no foundation, you cannot build. It's that simple. If you ever have even a small construction project, maybe a small garage, maybe a small home or something like that, it takes more time to get the groundwork and the foundation laid than it does to build a small building, right? It takes time to get the foundation properly. It takes time for young children, to learn how to count and get it in order. It takes time for them to learn the letters of the language they speak. It takes time for them to begin to add and subtract. It takes time for them to begin to write words and to form sentences. But there's some good news. There's some good news. It comes from Deuteronomy 6, beginning in verse 6. These words I'm commanding you today are to be upon your hearts. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and speak of them when you sit down, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. When we teach our young people accurate, true facts, they're going to have an understanding of the way the world was designed to work. And it's much like teaching them to count or to use their letters. When we offer them sound biblical knowledge, they can build on that foundation. And when we do that, and it is completely absent of the traditions and the legends that interfere with their knowledge, what will they be able to achieve? Think about that. What can someone do if they have truth? If they know that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? If they know in English A, B, C, D, E, what can they do? What can they achieve? Well, they're really going to achieve far, far more than we might ever imagine. Do you realize, and I think I've mentioned this previously in other episodes, but do you realize there are more Israeli people who have won the Nobel Prize than any other nation? Now, I just looked this up a little bit ago. Compared to the world's population, Israel is 0.12%. 0.12% of the world's population. You know, and there are more Jewish people who have been awarded the Nobel Prize than any other group. 0.12%. Why? Why is it? Because they've been taught the foundation. You know, in spite of their traditions, and they have many, in spite of the size, they hold more Nobel Prizes than any other nation. You know, imagine what they could do if they chose to give up their traditions that separate them from the Creator and just live the way they're designed to live. Right? Imagine what you can achieve if you choose to give up your traditions and live the way you are designed. Could you be the next Isaac Newton or the next Einstein? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Think about your children or your grandchildren. If they have a chance to learn truth without tradition from a biblical perspective, what could they achieve? You know, they deserve the chance to have a firm, accurate foundation of truth and facts from which they can draw knowledge from. We all deserve that, don't we? Don't you deserve the chance to learn that knowledge? You deserve that chance to learn that knowledge so you can pass it along to them. Now, I know that my Jewish listeners are saying, but But it's our traditions that bind us together. It's our traditions that give us that feeling of oneness. It's those traditions that separate us from the world. But do you? Are you? Are you? The Bible tells us that everyone who chooses to follow the Creator's instructions will be set apart from the rest of the world. It's right there in Exodus 19. Are you willing to practice your faith instead of your traditions? That's what we're asking. Are you willing to practice the faith that you have in your Creator? Or instead, will you continue to practice your traditions that are empty and have no value? The choice is yours. I really hope you choose wisely. I really hope you choose wisely. Practicing our traditions is not practicing our faith. It's not the same. It's different. If you want to practice your faith, learn to live the way your Creator designed you to live. And if you need help with that, that's what GiveGod90.com is for. It will help you. It will give you a good beginning and a good foundation. And I hope you choose to do that. So until next time, I do offer you many, many blessings, everyone.